All right, hey YouTube, Scott Brew here. I wanted to have a conversation about the TR-8S and USB audio versus MIDI sync going into the preamps on your audio interface. I see a lot of people on the forums, discussing which one they should be doing, and is there a better one? Is one going to give you better performance or better audio? And I think that they both have their place, right? They both have their purpose. But it's important to know which one you might want to choose at any given time in a performance, whatever, or studio setting. So I want to go through some of the pros and the cons of both of them, so that at least before you start recording or working with the TR-8S, how you can incorporate it best into your studio session. So there's some pros and some cons of USB audio, and the pros of USB audio is essentially with USB audio, you're going in USB into your DAW, and you can track out every single track from the TR-8S, every single sound onto its own track in your DAW, Ableton, or whatever it is you're using, and that's great. It provides pure USB audio. There's no conversion; it just goes straight from the drum machine into your computer. It also means that you can capture an entire performance. So if you start the machine or the song, and then you make a bunch of changes, some mute, some fader changes, effects, all that stuff, and it's going to last for 5 or 6 minutes, the entirety of your song, you can do that and capture the entire performance multi-tracked into your DAW. And that's very, very important in a lot of scenarios, because especially if you're going to go back and mix it and turn it into an actual song that's mixed and mastered and that sort of thing. Some of the cons are USB audio does take a little bit of time to set up, especially if you're using another more capable audio interface. So like for myself, I'm using a Focusrite Scarlett 18920, and it's got multiple ins and outs. It generally, I think, sounds better and is kind of more permanent in my studio setup here than the TR-8S, which I like to, sit in my bed or in the living room or whatever, and make beats on, and then plug it into the system. So if you are trying to set up using USB audio, you have to plug it in, select it as the audio interface, and then go in and, if you haven't done it before, you have to make sure that your timing, your MIDI timing, is correct, so you don't get any latency there. By default, the TR-8S was wildly off for me using USB audio and MIDI. So you do have to adjust it a bit to get it right. Now I found that minus 2.5 is actually perfect, and I'll show you where I enter that here. If we open our preferences, you can see you've got to have ASIO driver for audio with the TR-8S selected, and then under hardware setup, you want to make sure that you are set to the lowest audio buffer size. And what that means is that it essentially is going to be more immediate, so that your recordings have less input lag. And so once you've got those, you want to look at your MIDI setup here, and of course you want to have the input on track and sync on the input, track and sync on TR-8S control. You also want to have track and sync on the TR-8S output, and just the track button on TR-8S output control. And right here is where you want to set your MIDI clock sync delay. And so I did minus 2.5, and I messed around with a bunch of different versions, different amounts, and minus 2.5 seemed to give me the snappiest results. As you can see here, I'm going to go ahead, if you can see my TR-8S there, trusty TR-8S. I've got it plugged into, I've got the bass drum unmuted here. So let me mute everything else. And we're gonna get the kick drum in here on input 3 in Ableton, and you'll see how tight I'm able to get it here. Right, so that's pretty good. That one's a little early. Let's see the next one here. That one's a little early as well. And again, this thing seems to drift a bit, regardless of what. So that one's a little late. Regardless of whether you're using, that one's late too, whether you're using MIDI through USB and audio through USB, or using MIDI DIN sync through the MIDI cable, standard traditional MIDI cable coming out of your audio interface, there's always going to be a little bit of drift and delay. And I tend to think that that is the magic of working with a drum machine, right? You know, when you line everything up perfectly on the grid in Ableton or whatever your DAW is, and it's all on the grid and you just copy and paste it, I mean, you know that that's going to stay the same from second 1 to minute 5, 5 or whatever. And that can be good at times, but I tend to think that overall it's better to have a little bit of drifting between each individual hit. It just, the more that you have that over your whole track, as long as it's loosely around, and I say loosely within milliseconds here, as long as it's loosely around your grid, forward and back for each given hit across all the different tracks that you put in there, it just makes your song feel more alive and more exciting. And it's not something that your average listener or even you might be able to really pick up on, but it's definitely there, and it's definitely something that adds up over time. And I want to talk now about MIDI cable sync with your preamps as the audio input. Now, the pros for doing this are it's much quicker to set up. It's just plug into the MIDI and the MIDI cable into the back of your device if it's not already. Some people have big studio setups with everything permanently set up, and you assign your inputs into your DAW or Ableton, and hit record, and you go. You're off to the races. Also, the MIDI timing is definitely tighter by default. I rarely have needed to adjust the latency timing, and again, unless you've got a large chain of equipment that, the TR-8S is the last in line. So you've got 4 or 5 different synths and drum machines, and you're taking the MIDI through all the way out until you get to your TR-8S. You might have to adjust it there, but I really haven't found, I've got this one plugged into 3 devices ahead of it, and it's still very, very tight. Also, going into the preamps through your audio interface adds character, right? So preamps are known to add character. They add harmonics, they add 3-dimensionality, they add separation between the individual tracks. And this is something that I don't think that people should poo-poo or overlook, because having that, even though it's not good for your live performance, right? With every sound going at the same time, and you start at second 1 and go to the 5 minutes in, it can add some overall character again to your sound. And sometimes the sounds in your song end up sitting better in the mix for whatever reason. That preamps just kind of do that. I imagine that it's something to do with the audio is going out of the audio converters on the drum machine and going through some cables. So there's an analog to digital analog conversion there, and then it goes into the preamps on your audio interface, and again, more A to D conversion, and things just pick up a little bit more life there, right? And also things are much louder. And again, we talked about the MIDI timing that's inherently good about just regular old MIDI DIN. That kind of, it's been around forever. It's been around for 50 years now, I don't know, something like that. I'm sure maybe longer. It just sounds good, right? And it's immediate. Also too, when you're tracking things in one by one, you're able to make little sweeps of the filter and little decay changes and envelope changes and effect changes and stuff that you might not be able to do if you had all of the tracks going at once. You only have so much brain capacity. You only have so many hands and fingers to turn knobs, right? So if you're taking it a little bit slower and you're entering things in sound by sound, 16, 32 bars at a time, or maybe even sometimes like a minute at a time, you want to give each one of those, it turns into a little mini live performance for each song, each track in the song. Again, we're just talking about adding more and more character to your overall song, right? You want to get out of Loopville, get into more nuanced things that make a track exciting, right? And that was a pretty big aha moment for me, because I realized that, doing all these little micro performances, it really adds up, and you get this snowball effect where, you can have 3 minutes of just a kick drum and a bass sound and some percussion and hi-hats, and it doesn't get boring to listen to, because there's all these little micro changes and things are kind of slowly building and backing off and slowly building and backing off. That really, that is to me what takes a song that's kind of amateur sounding to a more professional overall sound, a more professional song that you might hear on, Beatport that's charting way up there. And again, it's all those little mini micro performances. And so, and I guess this, talk, discussion, whatever, started with just MIDI sync on the TR-8S. But I think stuff like this is valuable to think about, right? Because these are the little mini changes and attention to detail and nuance that make the pros the best and kind of separate the amateurs from the pros. And so the more of this stuff you can do, I think the better. So anyway, I think I was gonna do like a thing where I recorded all the tracks through USB audio and level matched them with recordings that go through the preamps on my audio interface and see if there's any difference. But honestly, I think that I did the the Solid State Logic SSL2 Plus video where I did a lot of comparisons between microphones going in through various interfaces and stuff. And even after watching that, you could really tell that over time, over layers, going through those preamps made it sound a lot better. And this is kind of a time-tested thing that really, everyone can agree on. Preamps just make things sound better, make them sit easier in the mix. So anyway, I hope this is helpful. And again, I just, I'm trying to promote and do more of these just conversations casual about, specific things in music production and music industry. Again, I do a music industry podcast called Voice of Electronic Music. It's on my YouTube channel. You can check it out. It's I've got 65 different episodes now where I just talk to different people in the music industry, DJs, producers, club promoters, club owners, festival throwers, all that sort of thing, and just kind of talk to them about what they're excited about and how they got to where they are. And it's a lot of fun. So check that out. And if you like the video, go ahead and give me a like and a subscribe. I'm going to start doing a lot more of these going forward. So again, I'm Scott Brio, and I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.